At 60, the mirror doesn't reflect what it once did. The lines etched across the face tell a different story of years survived, battles fought, dreams abandoned, and roles performed. But beneath these lines lies a deeper question. Who are we now, when the costumes of life begin to loosen and the stage dims? We spend decades building an identity: mother, teacher, manager, lover, friend. Each role becomes a layer of what we present to the world. But Jung warned us, the persona is only a mask, a compromise between our inner world and what society demands. In youth and middle age, this mask serves us well. It helps us function. But in old age, when society stops looking, what remains? Many enter their later years disoriented, not because the body weakens, but because the self begins to tremble. The persona, worn for so long, has grown brittle. The social expectations, once so clear, fade away. Retirement strips us of our profession. Children grow and no longer need us. The world, in a cruel irony, stops asking us to perform, but we no longer know how to be. This is the broken mirror, the realization that what once reflected our worth no longer shows our truth. It's a moment of existential confrontation, where the soul asks, have I lived as myself, or merely as what was needed of me? The journey that follows this question is not easy. But Jung believed that late life is not just decay, it's individuation, a process of finally meeting oneself, if we dare remove the mask. Imagine the mind as a grand theater. On stage, dressed in well-fitted costumes, stands the persona, the version of us most acceptable to the audience. Jung coined this term to describe the facade we craft to meet the expectations of society. But in the wings, behind the curtains, other actors wait, the repressed, the forgotten, the true self. Jung saw the persona not as a villain, but as a necessary actor. Without it, we couldn't participate in the collective play of civilization. Yet the danger lies in mistaking the actor for the person. When the curtain falls and the lights dim, especially in the twilight of life, many realize they never truly met the one behind the mask. The elderly often confront this painful truth. The social roles, executive, parent, spouse, dissolve, leaving behind a psychological nakedness. Without roles to play, the persona begins to disintegrate, and for those who have identified too closely with their mask, the loss feels like death. But Jung offered hope. He spoke of the self, not the persona, not the ego, but a deeper, central core of being. The theater of the mind is not abandoned in old age. It's transformed. If we accept the decline of performance, we make space for authenticity. And that, Jung taught, is where meaning is born. Not on stage, but in the quiet moments when we finally stop acting. From childhood, we are taught how to wear the mask. Be polite, be strong, don't cry, be a winner. These lessons aren't given maliciously. They're survival instructions. They form the blueprint of the persona, a psychological armor that lets us navigate a complex world. By adolescence, the mask becomes second nature. We learn to smile when we're hurt, to agree when we doubt, to blend in. In careers, relationships, and public life, we refine this persona, crafting an identity that earns approval, and it works until it doesn't. Carl Jung warned that the more polished the mask, the more dangerous the forgetting of the self beneath it. The persona isn't evil, it's functional. But problems arise when the function becomes the identity. In old age, this becomes a silent crisis. The systems that once rewarded the persona, work, social life, even family dynamics, begin to fade. What's left is often a person who doesn't know how to exist without applause. The construction of the persona is a brilliant feat, but in the end, it's just that, a construction. Not the house, but the facade. To dismantle it in later years is terrifying, but it's also the invitation of a lifetime to return to who we were before the mask was needed. From the moment we enter the world, we are taught the rules of performance. A newborn cries and learns that certain behaviors earn comfort. A toddler mimics smiles and is rewarded. As we grow, these behavioral reinforcements become encoded into a social costume, the persona. Jung understood this mechanism not just as cultural but evolutionary. The persona is our psychological camouflage. It allows us to belong, to survive. But at what cost? Society doesn't ask for your truth, it asks for compliance. From classrooms to boardrooms, the message is the same: fit in or be excluded. And so we adapt. We become what others need us to be. Charismatic, agreeable, productive, tough. It works. We get hired, we make friends, we build families. But each adaptation comes at a price, a slight betrayal of the authentic self. Jung argued that the persona is not inherently bad. In fact, it's essential. We need masks to navigate the collective, but problems arise when the mask fuses with the flesh. When a man who has always been the provider retires, he often finds himself lost. When a woman who lived as the caregiver finds herself alone, her sense of value evaporates. The persona is like a suit of armor. It protects us, but also imprisons us. The longer we wear it, the more we forget what it feels like to move freely. And when we reach old age, the armor begins to crack. Our roles diminish. Our relevance in the eyes of society fades. And suddenly, the protective mask no longer works. Worse, it becomes suffocating. This is the silent agony of many elders, to be reduced to the echo of a role that no longer matters. But what if this loss is not a tragedy, but a transition? What if the unraveling of the persona is not death, but rebirth? There is a moment, subtle but seismic, when the mask starts to slip. The performance becomes exhausting. The conversations that once flowed feel hollow. The gatherings feel like rehearsals of a play you no longer believe in. This is not depression. This is the awakening of the true self beneath the persona. Jung believed that aging was not a decline, but a stage of potential transformation. Yet our culture resists this. We glorify youth, productivity, and performance. We cling to the mask. Botox, social media, endless achievements, these are desperate attempts to keep the persona alive. But nature is not fooled. The body changes. Time slows. External validation fades. And in this void, a deeper voice begins to speak. It's the voice of the self, quiet, long ignored, but persistent. Old age, then, is not just a biological phase. It is a psychological crucible. The roles we played no longer fit. The expectations we carried no longer apply. The stage is empty, and for the first time, we must face the truth. Who am I without the applause? This moment is terrifying. Some retreat, clinging harder to their persona, even when it brings no joy. Others numb themselves with distractions. But for the brave few, this is the beginning of individuation, the descent into the soul. And like any descent, it's dark, unfamiliar, and filled with echoes. But it's also sacred, because only in the silence of the mask's collapse can we begin to hear our true name. You wake up at 70, 75, maybe 80. The house is quieter, your calendar emptier, the routines looser. You stand in the mirror and realize you no longer recognize the person looking back, not because they've changed, but because you never truly knew them to begin with. Carl Jung called this the midday of life, though it often arrives later. It's the point where the ego confronts its limitations, where the narratives we told ourselves begin to crumble. I am a leader. I am a caretaker. I am respected. But when these roles are gone, the question becomes unbearable. Was I ever anything beyond them? This identity crisis is not a flaw. It's a sign that the soul is awakening. But most aren't prepared for it, because modern society teaches us how to build an identity, but not how to dismantle one. It teaches us how to succeed, not how to surrender. And so we wrestle. We try to maintain the persona through volunteering, consulting, or becoming the wise elder at family gatherings. But deep inside, something stirs, a longing for authenticity, a hunger to speak without performing, to feel without filtering. This is where the conflict deepens. We fear that without the persona, we are nothing, that removing the mask will leave us exposed, fragile, meaningless. But Jung insisted the opposite. The persona hides the true self, not because the self is weak, but because it is powerful. So powerful, in fact, that society cannot handle its full presence. In late life, we stand at a threshold. To cling to the persona is to wither. To let it go is to awaken. The choice is terrifying, but the journey through that fear is where real identity begins, not as a title, but as truth. Carl Jung believed that the greatest goal of human life was not success, wealth, or even happiness. It was individuation. The process of becoming who you truly are, beneath the social masks, the wounds, and the inherited expectations. It is not a linear journey, it is an alchemical transformation, and perhaps nowhere is it more urgent or more painful than in old age. In youth, we build, we reach outward, careers, relationships, dreams. We live in the ego's domain, concerned with status, identity, control. But as time passes, something begins to shift. The soul calls inward, the outer world grows quieter, and the inner world, once ignored, starts to demand attention. Individuation is the process by which we integrate the many parts of ourselves, the persona, the shadow, the anima or animus, and ultimately the self. But this integration often begins only after we've been stripped of our familiar roles. Retirement, loss, solitude, these become unlikely invitations to depth. The noise of performance fades, and in that silence, we meet the stranger within. But this process is not passive. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront what we've avoided for decades. Jung compared it to descending into a cave filled with forgotten memories and hidden truths. Yet those who make this journey often emerge more whole, more peaceful, more free. The mistake is believing old age is the end. In Jungian psychology, it is the most important chapter, the time when the soul finally comes home. We like to believe that aging makes us wiser, kinder, more serene. But Carl Jung warned of another possibility. If we repress parts of ourselves for too long, they don't disappear. They wait, in the shadow, in silence. And in old age, when the persona begins to erode, the shadow steps forward. The shadow is not evil. It is simply what we have not accepted about ourselves. Anger, jealousy, lust, grief, fear, all the parts that society deemed unacceptable. Throughout life, we push them down to fit in, to be good, to succeed. But repression is not deletion, it's storage. And old age, ironically, can become the most dangerous stage for shadow eruption. The control mechanisms weaken, the social filters loosen, the emotional triggers from unresolved pasts resurface. A respected elder may suddenly become bitter, erratic, even cruel. This is not dementia. This is the unintegrated shadow breaking through. Jung said that we must own our shadow or be owned by it. In late life, the stakes are higher. There is less time to avoid, less strength to suppress, and the soul, closer to its end, becomes more desperate to be whole. But confronting the shadow doesn't mean indulging it. It means dialoguing with it, understanding its message, embracing its origin. Only then can peace emerge, not the peace of silence, but the peace of reconciliation. Those who confront their shadow in old age often become luminous, not perfect, but real, not flawless, but free. There is a quiet tragedy that Jung warned us about, a life so invested in performance that the performer forgets they are more than their role. It happens slowly. A person becomes a doctor, a father, a leader, a caretaker, and in that success, they lose the memory of the soul that exists beyond titles. And then one day, the roles vanish, the career ends, the children move on, the audience disappears, And the person, now alone, realizes they never built an identity beyond the costume. This is the danger of the persona. Not that it exists, but that we confuse it with who we are. When we do, old age becomes a collapse, a slow erosion of meaning, a bitter reckoning with the emptiness beneath the mask. Jung saw this often. Patients who, in their 70s or 80s, experienced deep depression, not because they were sick, but because they were spiritually starved. They had spent so long serving a role that they forgot how to serve themselves. The signs are subtle: an obsession with past achievements, an inability to rest, resentment toward change, a fear of solitude. These are not just symptoms of aging. They are signals from the soul, asking for something more. To live trapped in the persona is to age without awakening, but to question it, to loosen its grip, to finally step behind the mask, that is liberation. And even in the final years of life, it is not too late to begin, because the self, neglected, patient, eternal, never stops waiting to be found. Success in our world is a form of worship, titles, accolades, admiration. These become the modern-day idols we build our lives around. But Carl Jung warned, what we worship eventually owns us. And when we reach old age, we often find that the very pedestal we climbed has become our cage. In our youth and midlife, we chase recognition. We construct a persona that fits the mold of success: competent, admired, powerful. It works until time dismantles the scaffolding. The retirement speech fades, the applause quiets, the phone stops ringing, and what remains is a hollow echo of identity. Many who were once revered, doctors, artists, leaders, struggle deeply in their later years. Not because they've lost their talent, but because they never built a self outside their success. When the world stops rewarding the mask, they find they have no language for being without it. Jung called this the danger of inflation. When the ego becomes fused with the persona, we don't just play the role, we become it. And when that role ends, we don't know how to live. Old age then becomes a confrontation with the void, the space where our accolades no longer matter, the moment when external validation no longer arrives. And the pain is profound, not because the world has turned away, but because we've forgotten how to turn inward. But it's in this moment of emptiness that something sacred can emerge. The dismantling of false idols, the beginning of authenticity, the rediscovery of the self as something more than its performance. It's a painful freedom, but it's freedom nonetheless. There is a peculiar loneliness reserved for those who have mastered the art of performance. The people who were always dependable, always smiling, always strong. The ones who held families together, led companies, carried burdens without complaint. Society praises them, but in old age, that praise becomes silence, and the silence becomes unbearable. Carl Jung understood this silence not as neglect, but as revelation. The persona, when overused, becomes an emotional dam. It holds everything in: grief, rage, longing, fatigue, and eventually that dam cracks. Elders who were once the rock find themselves isolated, not because others abandoned them, but because they never learned how to ask for help, how to be seen in their fragility, how to be loved without earning it. This is the curse of the perfect persona. It doesn't just fool others, it fools the self. It convinces us we are invulnerable. That vulnerability is weakness. That needing others is shameful. But the truth is, in old age, invulnerability becomes isolation. And only by removing the armor can we receive the one thing we've always needed but never claimed: true intimacy. This loneliness is not a punishment, it's a signal, a chance to reclaim our humanity, to be soft, to be real, to be broken and still worthy. And in that act of surrender, connection becomes possible again. The unconscious never forgets. Everything we've ignored, silenced, or suppressed waits in its dark halls, memories, desires, fears, truths. Jung saw the unconscious not as a threat, but as a mirror. And in old age, when the distractions of life recede, that mirror becomes inescapable. For decades, the persona keeps the unconscious at bay. We are too busy, too focused, too rewarded for staying in control. But when the world grows quiet, when we sit alone in our homes, in our thoughts, the unconscious returns. It speaks in dreams, in unexpected emotions, in sudden memories from childhood. Sometimes it screams, a long repressed grief over a parent, a guilt from a betrayal, a love never expressed, a truth never lived. This return can feel like madness. But Jung insisted it is not madness, it is integration. The unconscious does not rise to destroy us. It rises to complete us, and yet many fight it. They numb themselves with routines, with television, with nostalgia, anything to avoid the confrontation. But the unconscious is patient and relentless. Those who listen, however, who allow these voices to speak, often undergo a profound transformation. They become storytellers, healers, poets. Not because they gain wisdom, but because they embrace their wounds. The unconscious does not seek perfection, it seeks wholeness. And in old age, that wholeness becomes not just possible, but necessary, because the end is near, and the soul, finally, wants to speak. Old age is often portrayed in two extremes, either a peaceful retirement or a slow decay. But Jung proposed a third path, one far more nuanced and transformative. Aging authentically isn't about comfort or collapse, it's about confrontation and ultimately liberation. To age authentically is to face everything you've denied, the joy you postponed, the truths you avoided, the identity you built for others. This confrontation can feel like disintegration because in many ways it is. The persona begins to unravel. The ego loses its grip, the outer world recedes, but what feels like falling apart may, in fact, be falling together. Jung believed that aging is the final alchemical process, the fire that burns away illusion, the vessel where the fragmented psyche can, at last, be made whole. But it requires a kind of death, the death of the mask, of ambition, of the need to impress. This death is terrifying. It's the loss of everything we've used to define ourselves, but it also opens space for the soul to emerge, for the self, not the performer, not the role, not the resume, but the true self, to finally breathe. Authentic aging is not passive. It demands attention, courage, and grace, but those who accept its challenge often become something rare, whole human beings, not just old, but eternal. What if the most profound awakening of your life came after 70? Carl Jung believed that the second half of life was not a slow descent, but a new beginning, a spiritual rebirth, a return, not to the person you once were, but to the soul you always were. To be reborn in old age is not a metaphor. It is an experience, one that begins the moment you stop pretending, the moment you allow silence to speak, the moment you look in the mirror, not to see who's aged, but to see who's always been hidden. This rebirth is not loud. It doesn't happen in crowds or celebrations. It happens in quiet mornings, in forgotten journals, in a tear shed over a memory you thought you'd buried, in a truth finally spoken aloud to yourself. The true self is not something you become. It's something you uncover. Beneath the layers, beneath the fear, beneath the story you were told you had to live. For some, this moment never comes. They die inside their mask. But for others, even in the final decade of life, the fire is lit. And what emerges is not a new persona, but a soul without armor. And in that rebirth, something extraordinary happens. Life begins again, not as performance, but as presence. In every life, there comes a final scene. The lights dim, the audience fades, the curtain begins to fall. And in that moment, the persona, the faithful mask worn through every decade, finally falls away. but something remains. Carl Jung believed that death is not the end, but a transition, not into nothingness, but into integration. The persona which served its purpose is no longer needed. The ego which defended us dissolves, and what's left is the eternal. This isn't mystical, it's psychological. The closer we come to death, the more we confront what truly matters. Not achievements, not image, but essence. Who we were, beneath the role. What we loved, what we feared, what we never dared to be. In this final act, those who have done the work of individuation often experience peace, not because they are ready to die, but because they have truly lived. They leave not as symbols of success, but as souls fulfilled. And so the question becomes, will you let the persona die before you do? Because when it does, when the mask drops and the soul steps forward, you are no longer a character in a story. You are the story itself, and that story, even after death, echoes. As we draw the curtain on this exploration of the persona's intricate dance with identity, especially in the twilight years of life, we find ourselves at a crossroads of introspection and revelation. The journey we've undertaken isn't merely an academic or psychological expedition. It's a mirror reflecting the deepest recesses of our souls, challenging us to confront the masks we've worn and the truths we've buried. Throughout our lives, we've been actors on the grand stage of existence, donning various personas to navigate the complex tapestry of societal expectations, personal ambitions, and relational dynamics. These masks, while serving as tools for survival and connection, often become so intertwined with our essence that distinguishing the actor from the role becomes an arduous task. In the vigor of youth and the prime of adulthood, the persona can be a formidable ally, aiding us in carving out our place in the world. However, as the sands of time slip through the hourglass and we transition into the later chapters of our lives, the once comfortable masks may begin to feel constricting, even suffocating. The roles we've played, be it the diligent professional, the nurturing parent, or the steadfast partner, start to fade, leaving behind echoes of identities that no longer serve our evolving selves. This shedding of roles, while disconcerting, offers a profound opportunity for rebirth. It's in this space of vulnerability and uncertainty that we are invited to embark on the most authentic journey of all, the journey inward. Here we confront the shadows we've ignored, the dreams we've deferred, and the truths we've silenced. It's a pilgrimage toward the core of our being, unearthing the unadulterated self that exists beyond societal labels and expectations. In this sacred space of self-discovery, we encounter the boundless love of the divine, a love that sees beyond our facades and embraces us in our raw, unfiltered humanity. This love isn't contingent upon our achievements, our roles, or our adherence to societal norms. It's a love that existed before we donned our first mask and will persist long after we've laid them all down. This divine love is eloquently encapsulated in the words of John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. This passage isn't merely a theological statement. It's a testament to the unwavering, unconditional love that the Creator extends to each of us. It's an invitation to step out from behind our masks and into a relationship rooted in authenticity, grace, and eternal significance. Accepting this invitation doesn't necessitate grand gestures or perfect lives. It requires a heart willing to be seen, known, and loved in its entirety. It's about acknowledging our need for connection beyond the temporal and embracing the transformative power of divine love. As we conclude this narrative, I invite you, dear viewer, to reflect on the masks you've worn and consider the freedom that comes from laying them down. Embrace the journey toward your true self, and in doing so, open your heart to the love that has always been pursuing you. If this message resonates with you, and you find yourself yearning for deeper connection and understanding, I encourage you to explore the teachings of Jesus Christ. His life and message offer a pathway to profound peace, purpose, and identity beyond the confines of the persona. Thank you for joining us on this introspective journey. If you found value in this exploration, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content that delves into the depths of the human experience. Your engagement helps us continue to create meaningful narratives that inspire and transform. Perhaps what we fear most about aging is not the decline of the body, but the silence that aging brings, the absence of noise, of expectation, of constant doing. But in that silence, if we dare to listen, we hear something ancient, something eternal. It is the whisper of the soul, long overshadowed by persona, now ready to speak. This soul, this unmasked self, was never lost, only buried beneath layers of survival and ambition. It is the version of ourselves that never needed approval to exist. It does not age because it was never temporal. It does not fear because it lives in truth. And it is here, at the edge of our years, that we are finally still enough to meet it. This moment, this sacred unraveling of who we thought we were, is not something to be feared. It is, in fact, the doorway to everything. And perhaps, beyond all the psychology and philosophy, beyond the beautiful framework Carl Jung offered us, there is a far deeper truth, that we were made for love. Not conditional love, not earned love, but love that precedes our birth and outlasts our death. A love so vast it doesn't merely heal us, it redefines us. This is the love we find when we encounter the heart of the gospel, a message not of religion, but of relationship, not of rules, but of rescue. It tells us that we are not merely products of culture, not random accidents of evolution, but beings created with purpose by a God who longs to know us fully and restore us completely. John 3:16 does not say that God tolerated the world. It says he loved it, deeply, passionately, enough to offer himself through his Son, so that we wouldn't have to wander through life enslaved to masks or crushed under shame, so that we could live, not just exist, not just function, but truly live. This love meets us where we are. Whether you're at the height of your career or alone in a quiet apartment at 87, whether you feel like your life has been a great performance or a series of missed cues, whether you're full of questions or quietly curious, it meets you, not with judgment, but with open arms. And this love doesn't just invite you to believe in an idea. It invites you to enter a story that began before the foundations of the earth and includes you by name, a story that tells you you matter, you are seen, you are loved, and you are never too old or too far gone to come home. If this message is stirring something in your heart, don't silence it, don't explain it away. Maybe it's not just emotion, maybe it's a nudge from something greater than yourself, from someone who has been walking beside you, even when you didn't know it. Accepting Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior is not about becoming religious. It's about coming alive. It's about removing the last mask, the one that says, I'm fine on my own, and admitting that we need help, we need grace, we need love beyond what this world can give. He offers it freely, right now. And so I ask, respectfully, humbly, lovingly, would you consider taking that step? Not toward a system, but toward a Savior. Would you consider opening your heart to the one who made you, who knows you, and who has never stopped loving you? You can speak to him now, right where you are, with whatever words you have. He's not impressed by fancy prayers. He listens to honest ones. You might say something like, Lord, I've worn many masks. I've tried to be everything for everyone. But today, I want to be known by you. I believe you love me. I believe Jesus gave his life for me, and I want to receive that love. I want to live in truth, not illusion. Come into my life. Make me whole. Show me who I really am. That's it, a simple invitation, a turning of the heart, and all of heaven leans in to respond. If you've taken that step, or even if you're just considering it, I want to celebrate you. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. The journey inward becomes a journey upward, and you are not alone. Now, I want to invite you to engage with us. If this documentary spoke to you, if it challenged, comforted, or moved something within, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating content that goes beyond the surface and touches the soul. More than that, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Tell us what resonated with you. Share a moment in your life when you felt the mask slip and the real you begin to emerge. Let's build a community of honesty, courage, and transformation. This is not just a video, it's a conversation, and your voice matters. And if you feel someone else in your life, maybe a parent, a grandparent, a friend, needs to hear this, please share it with them. Sometimes a single story can be the spark that changes everything. Let us be that spark. Let us be that voice in the silence. Let us be the mirror that reflects not the persona, but the person, the soul, the truth. And above all, let us never forget, we are loved, we are not forgotten. And even as the curtain closes on one act, a new one always waits, full of light, full of grace, and full of life.